So the first question that I received was around hashing out a process that we do inside my courses, particularly the Attachment 101 courses, which focuses on focus wheels. So how do we start to reframe core beliefs and open things up so that they feel more allowing, more receptive, so that we are able to see the possibilities for love in our lives, and this has to do with adjusting the filters through which we understand the world. Our attachment styles are a pattern and frequency of thought, feeling, and behavior that create a type of lens or filter through which we perceive the world, through which we perceive the accessibility of love in reality in general, the way that we perceive our ability to attract love, to sustain love, and to choose love over and over again. And so our attachment styles are really an archetypal pattern that creates the lens through which we understand these things. So it's really important when we are working with trying to shift our understanding of attachment security that we are working on it on the level of mind, body, and spirit. And so when we play with reshaping our thoughts and the way that we make meaning of our experiences, we're talking about cognitive reframing, right? We're reframing our thoughts and we are wanting to create and install new ones so that when your body receives incoming information and your nervous system receives new incoming information, that there is a new narrative that you're assigning to that stimulus. Okay. So someone offered in my online community some examples of beliefs that they were struggling with and how to reframe them. And oftentimes our limiting beliefs are truly like an onion. There's the belief on top, but it's actually supported and buttressed by a deeper core belief underneath it. And maybe even there's another false premise about reality that exists beneath that. So when we are digging into our limiting beliefs, we really have to understand that it is a sequential process, that we are unpeeling the layers and trying to get down to the core beliefs, which are usually very basic and fundamental, which are I am not worthy, right? I would say the most prominent one is I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, and because I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, right? Why do we do this? Well, because if we can shift the way that we make meaning of our experience, then what happens is we start to bring ourselves into greater alignment with what I call your spirit, the essence of your soul, an alignment to your higher self and the part of you that is one with nature and one with source energy. The part of you that allows you to tap into what I call soul-centered security, which is rearranging your attachment proximity and your attachment orientation instead of to another person, to the transcendent aspect of yourself, which means that you are actually reorienting yourself in relationship to everyone, right? Because that is the paradox of attachment, both in the psychological framework and in a spiritual framework, that we are both, we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. So we are all one, and yet we are all living these separate experiences in order to understand better the experience of oneness and separateness, right? When our thoughts are not aligned with the perspective of your highest self, of your spirit, let's say, then your spirit will kind of give you a jolt. It'll be, ooh, that's not a nice thought. Let's make you feel something. Let's shoot some arousing energy through your body and make it uncomfortable so that you notice how inaccurate that thought is, so that you notice how nasty that thought is, so that you notice how inaccurate and unaligned that thought is, so that you can choose the next approximate reframe or thought that will bring you closer in alignment. And as you start to think more positive thoughts, that feeling is going to start to feel more comfortable, right? You're going to start to feel more on target, let's say. Now, when the thought is very disparate, very disconnect from the idea that you are a brilliant ball of light, love, and compassion, the thoughts are going to feel increasingly bad. You are going to have a quality of energy that feels what I'm going to call dissonant. Sort of like when you have a song that's out of tune or an instrument that's out of tune, that's dissonance, right? And it's hard on the ears. So those thoughts are increasingly dissonant. They are not aligned. They're not in harmony with the essence of your being. So the point of reframing our thoughts is to bring you into alignment with the essence of your being and to create greater harmony, right? A harmonic thought, let's say. So when we're reframing our thinking, it can help us to look at what are some of the beliefs that we're carrying around and to write them down or simply to state them, because that's the first step in naming and claiming what it is that is sort of operating behind the curtain of your unconscious mind in a habitual way. Because our brain receives unbelievable amounts of information, and over time, we cull it down into habitual and automatic ways of thinking so that we can make the best use of our energy, right? But if those habitual ways of thinking have carved a groove or designed a mechanism that leaves you in a constant state of dissonance, that means we have to use that additional energy to go in and to reframe it. So a few prompts to help you understand what are the habitual beliefs going on and on automation behind the curtain. When it comes to my ability to find love, I believe. When it comes to my romantic satisfaction, I believe. I believe, but I really want to believe. So, what are the things you want to believe about this? And I wish that, what do you wish? So, wants are good because wants usually conjure up all of the noise, all of the dissonant beliefs that say why you can't have what you want. But when you say what you wish, there's an element of fantasy to that, which sometimes can skirt around the defenses of the ego, right? So taking a look at what you wish. And so these two things together help us understand what's possible and why we are arguing against what's possible. So for example, I believe that the beginning is easy and fun, but it's hard to tell who's going to be a good fit in the long term. I'm afraid that I ask too much. They won't accept my daughter and will not want to work with me, and they will want to leave. So let's take the first part of this. We want to take a look at how to reframe this. So first, I believe that the beginning is easy and fun, but that it's hard to tell who is going to be a good fit in the long term. Okay. I believe that the beginning is easy and fun, but that it's hard to tell who's going to be a good fit in the long term. So here there are some underlying premises that you should and need to know if it's a long-term fit in the beginning, because otherwise, what? What's the fear? Okay. So if it doesn't work, then that means what? So there's layers of expectation and meaning here that need to really be deconstructed just in that first part of that statement. Okay. And so the assumption there underneath all of that is likely untrue. And so you want to try to challenge that. So let's play with this, okay? That you should need to know if it's a long-term fit in the beginning, because otherwise, what? Otherwise, what happens? Because otherwise I will be hurt and there will never be any kind of someone for me in this world, right? I'll never find anyone for me in this world, or I'll be hurt and I will never recover from that wounding, or I will be proven to be a failure and there is no way that I can ever come back from that. And if I'm a failure, then I don't deserve what, right? I don't deserve love. I don't deserve to live. Usually it's I don't deserve to live. And that is why this is the seed of insecure attachment style, because attachment is a fear of death. It's an existential concern, death of the body, death of the mind, death of our emotions, death of the ego. So insecure attachment styles at the core of each one of them is an existential fear. Okay. So let's review this one more time. I believe that the beginning is easy and fun, but that it's hard to tell who's going to be a good fit in the long term. And I need to know if it's going to be a good fit in the long term in the beginning, because otherwise I might fail, I might get hurt, and it won't work. And if it doesn't work, that means that I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable. And if I'm unlovable, then I'm not worthy of life, right? Then I don't have a reason to live. And so we obviously need to challenge that. The next part of that one statement, which is already loaded. Okay. I'm afraid that if I ask too much, then they won't accept my daughter and they won't want to work with me and want me to leave. So I think we could broaden this idea of they won't accept my daughter, meaning they won't accept who I am, right? Or they won't accept the responsibilities that I have, or they don't want to accept the important parts of my life, right? And they won't want to work with me, and then they'll just abandon me. Okay. So when we hear statements like that, it's likely that there's an inner child, right? There's a wounded inner child feeling like, and who was told at one point, or it was demonstrated to them at one point, that they were too much or too intense of a burden. And yet we're assuming too much power and responsibility for making decisions for other people about how they are going to handle their emotions, right? So when a parent tells you that you're too much or you're too much of a burden, they're giving you an enormous amount of power as a child, enormous amount of power. They are saying that my emotional well-being is dependent upon you, young child, being and acting and doing and saying certain things and being a certain way. What tremendous power that child has now, right? And it's inappropriate and it's not true. The adult has the responsibility in that situation, but they're not taking it on because their inner child wasn't healed enough, right? Or wasn't acknowledged and then wasn't healed enough. So this is how we get that intergenerational wounding going on, passing the same themes onto our kids. Okay. And so as a result, because our parents make us powerfully responsible for their feelings, we don't understand personal boundaries because they merge with us, right? They don't teach us boundaries because they don't understand boundaries themselves. It makes it very, very difficult for us to suss out what is mine to process and what is appropriate enough to invite someone else into an emotional experience in exchange so that we can process it together, right? And understanding what is mine and what is yours and what is shared in this space. And it's okay to share an emotional process because my emotional process isn't going to consume you, right? Because I'm not going to give you ultimate power over my emotional process either. And so everybody's going to have different needs, desires in this regard, how much they want to process internally and in an autonomous way, and then bring it to the relationship, and how much of us are going to want to access the container of the relationship to help us process things together. So there's a million shades of gray in here, right? But the more we can be consciously aware of what those shades of gray, i.e., those boundaries are for each of us and our within ourselves, the better we can communicate that and find that common ground with a partner, right? Okay. So when this is the case, there's an underlying assumption that we are taking on of far too much power, far too much power, while at the same time feeling like we have none. This is that thing that when you feel like, oh, I'm too intense and yet I'm not enough, right? Oh, my power, you're so afraid of me and my power and my emotional intensity. And that means that I can never be angry or I can never express a need because my power will just lay waste to you and you'll run away from how strong, how intense I am. I'm such a burden with all my power, right? And yet we feel like we have none. And yet I'm not enough for you. That must mean I'm not good enough for you. That must mean, and yet somehow we're completely helpless and disempowered. So this is the paradox of anxious and avoidant conundrum. This is why I say anxiety and avoidance are two sides of the same coin. They are just two different ways of learning to cope with that conundrum, that vacuum, okay? And never having been taught the boundaries required to understand this is mine and this is yours, right? What is me and what is somebody else's? And this extends to all different facets of life and categories of expression in a relationship, particularly emotional energy. In my attachment online courses, lessons 6 and 7 is going to walk you through an introduction to this. And this is what we call parts work. It's inner child healing, right? It's when we take a look at what are all these different voices going on inside of me and why, and overall I'm experiencing it as anxiety or avoidance or this big feeling, this big energy moving through my body that feels like resistance or feels like I can't get out of my own way. So when we start to draw lines around that energy, we realize it's just different voices that are asking for your attention so that they can be their needs that they are condensed around, right? The need that is the glue around which this kind of sub-personality exists within you, this voice exists within you, can be understood and met in a different framework, right? And so in the attachment courses, lessons 6 and 7 are going to walk you through a process of connecting to that. Otherwise, you can check out a playlist on my YouTube channel. It's called Healing the Inner Child with Parts Work. And it's going to walk you through four videos. They're going to walk you through some education, as well as 2 experiential processes, including a guided visualization and an art activity, and then a demo of doing it with someone to show what this looks like in a session, for example. So I'll put a link to that in the caption of this video and in the replay. But I hope that that helps us to understand that when we are trying to deconstruct these limiting beliefs that we have, that we really want to take a look at what are the most impactful and prominent underlying false premises that we are holding on to. So to bring this back to the beginning, in this case, that I'm not worthy of love, that I have no power, and yet I have all the power. And that if I can't be with this person, then I'm going to die, right? So we want to make sure that we are digging into those and understanding that that we have to, those are the limiting beliefs that we have to tackle first before you're going to be able to even touch the ones that exist on top of it. And that is parts work. That's integrating the different aspects of the inner child.